OG Nitty. What's good, my G?
Man, I'm cooling, man. As always, man, just sit back, reminisce about some of the questions, man, that people have asked me since I've been home. When one seems to be more so now than any is, how did I make it out? Well, I always tell people, man, feel free to go look up my case, this and that. But man, being in there, it was just such a mind blowing thing, and it went opposite of everything that I was ever taught about the game, right? Because I was taught like, gangsters didn't die in cages. Animals died in cages, right? And that was something, especially back then I'd always fancied myself to be. But I knew that it was like it was an enemy bigger than I ever faced before. A lot of the young cats would say now they become ops, right? It was like a bigger one than I ever faced before. And at first I couldn't figure out, man, how am I gonna come up out of this? And one of the main motivators, man, may she rest in peace, was my son mother as well as her mom. Both of them, is deceased now, unfortunately. But one thing that my son's grandmother used to always say about me, she would tell the rest of the family, say, man, if it's a crack in the fucking floor or in the wall, he's going to find himself a way how to melt himself down and get the hell out of there. Trust me, he's getting out, right? So it was just, it became a determination, because I was watching my son, grow up right before my eyes, in there, and it was like, wow, and like it was so mind blowing, to hear his voice change and to see when he first started getting his peach fudge up on his for his mustache, and I was like, wow, and then it kind of reminds you of you know what it's all about, so you get a determination. So I went to a law class, was being held in there by a guy by the name of John Booth, and the penitentiary was different, to say the least. Inmates really ran the penitentiary, in there. I mean, like, inmates dealt with your visits, when you was called for visit. Inmates dealt with where you was going to sleep at and what tier and cell you was going to sleep at in the penitentiary. And inmates dealt with, things like counseling and things such as the law class. So I could never forget it. When I got in there, they called me to an office, and I'm really expecting this to be a real life, fucking counselor of some sort, right? And come to find out, this motherfucker locked up just like I am. So I'm like, how like the fuck? He said, man, look, he said, two things you do in this penitentiary. He said, man, you can die in this motherfucker. He said, man, you can do everything your motherfucking power to live till you get out. And so it was like he told me that, and it was crazy because it kind of like when he said it, it really hit home. And normally I got to go back and think about things like that because normally in my day I replay the conversations and stuff that I had with people, because I mean in my mind, because sometimes we miss stuff, right? And we live in a world of fast talkers, right? So
Let me go back. Let's go back a little bit, Nitty, before you go into when you how you actually got out of there and stuff. Like, go back to like the time you got, and then like how further was you into your sentence before you started realizing like, okay, I'm trying to get myself out of here now.
Well, I was about 9 years into my sentence, and it was just like I was seeing friends of mine, and if y'all seen like other, some of the other podcasts, like local heroes, like hood heroes of mine, they was dying off, right? And then I was seeing here and there, like guys I was cool with, they was giving their time back and going home. So I was like, oh shit, man, because you sitting there, and one thing that, man, you will most definitely experience is a loneliness like you have never thought that you could, right? Weaker men, they turn to other men, if you know what I mean. But you have to have something when you have that type of time. Like when the judge sits there and tell you, say, man, look, I'm sentencing you to double natural life plus 141 years without any possibility of parole. Like you sit right there and let that sink in, you like, man, like why the fuck y'all ain't just kill me? And then you go through these phases, right? And I know I did, and other guys I'm really close with, close friends of mine who have given their time back as well. They go through the same thing, and you go through these phases, man, because you look for somebody to blame it on, right? Of how you got caught, how you got convicted. You look for somebody to blame it on, but one of the worst. It's almost like going through withdrawals. I would imagine for dope fiends or crack addicts and so forth and so on. You go through withdrawals because the hardest one is to face the fact that you did something, you was lacking, and you got yourself caught, right? Or in some cases, even worse, you had different options. You just chose not to choose one of them. So when it get to things like that, all that kind of stuff, it hits you. And so you say, hey, man, I can't live the rest of my life being mad with myself, right? So I got to find something else to do. And for me, it was a law class. Once a guy, he had told me years ago about him referring me to the guy, John Booth. I paid it no mind back then because, I was young and I was still angry coming in the penitentiary, right, with all the time. But it was when I walked in there, it was almost like an air of respect I had for him, right? Because he didn't seem the same as other inmates, right? He seemed like he was important, but without trying to make himself seem like that, right? And the way he talked, and I was like, wow. And then I said, man, this dude, sound like he know what he's talking about. But then when I seen letters that actual law professors had written him, asking him what did he think about this law, what did he think about that law, and I could almost say, man, single-handedly, almost, man, him, guys like Kenny Collins, it's a few of them that they single-handedly, man, stopped the death penalty in Maryland. They try to say, hey, it was unfair, this and that. Yeah, they pointed it out that it was unfair, right? That you would have guys going to death row, and they might have had killed somebody white and or killed somebody foreign, right, when they're black. But you have another black guy. He done killed 4 or 5 people. And you say, hey, man, well, look here, man, you get life, man. We just gonna go ahead and pile them all in together. And they were saying, nah, you can't. Y'all doing that now based on race. And it was a number of other issues, right? But what made me really started getting into that and wanting to go home, man, it was like once I did it, it was like I was fascinated and obsessed with it at the same time because it is nothing worse than finding out that you've been bamboozled, that a motherfucker played you, right? I know it ain't for me. Some motherfuckers, hey, to each their own. Some people are professional victims. I'm not one, right? But when somebody get over on me, it's like I think I go through phases with that as well. One of the phases is uh, I get angry when I find out. But then once I get past that, I find it funny. I'm like, man, that was a good one, man. And this and that. And I try not to ever let it happen again. And but when I really got obsessed with this law thing, man, it was like I just told myself one day, I said, man, I'm not dealing with nothing else. I'm not dealing with, basketball. I'm not dealing with hanging out in the yard. Man, every time they let me in that law library, that's where I'm going. Right. And I just kept on, kept on, kept on. And then I was ordering law books and some guys, they had law books and really their peoples, would send them to them and they never even read them. And so some of them might give them to me, some of them sell them to me. And what I did was I just kept on studying the law. I kept on studying the law. I kept on studying about every issue that I could find that was more commonly made by the Circuit Court of Baltimore City, and then, as well as in Maryland. And then I just came upon my issue, right? It was me and a buddy of mine, a dude by the name of Stroll. We was in there, and I'm looking at the issue, and it's like I see it in the case where I see it say reverse remanded for new trial. This is in a case that I find this identical issue in that I know I have in my transcript. And so I'm wondering, like, it was such a shock that I had to really question myself, was I reading it right? Like, I'm probably not even reading this shit right or something, man. And because it was too good to be true, right? And my man walked over and said, man, he said, what's up? We in the library. He looked at, he said, oh boy, you gotta go uptown issue. And I said, yeah. He said, yeah. Look, he said he went, got the case, and I was still standing in the aisle, and we sat there and looked over the case and come to find out it was the exact same judge and everything that I had. Right? It was exact same, he was the same one did it. So, but they played games for a long time, man. I'm talking about at least 20 years before I started getting any sort of rhythm. Right? They played games. I'm like almost to the bitter end. Right? And I never forget it. When I first raised the issue, they had given me a public defender at this time. The public defender was like, he tried to trick me by saying, man, no, they not. No, first he tried to say this is not an issue. I said, no, man, this is the issue. I say, man, I say this right here in the case. I got the case right here. I read it. So he said, well, man, right now they're not dealing with them with the courts and not dealing with them kind of issues. Now imagine how the fuck that sounds. Right, he can't do nothing like that. So I say, oh, you fought. Because I knew, I said, okay, the fix is in. Y'all trying to throw me because y'all know I done found something, right? So we get down to court. He still tried to come to court with me. I said, man, I told the judge, I said, man, look, I said, I don't want him, man, this and that. I said, man, I fought him when he came to visit me. I don't even know why he's here. So the judge, where he messed up at, right, he just allowed me to represent myself, which by law I can. However, what he messed up at was this. He was supposed to ask me why I wanted to fire him. I could have had explained to him, I have this issue here in my reasonable doubt instruction. Here's the case. I had this exact judge, and he said the very same thing in this case that he said in mine. As you can see in this case has been reversed and remanded for new trial. The judge would have then, at that point, had a duty to order him to raise that issue. Now, he can't make him argue perfectly, but he has a really what you call an obligation once he see that to tell him to raise that issue, because everything is supposed to be in the pursuit of justice. So if he's not raising the issue, it's not in the pursuit of justice. By him failing to do that, right? I represented myself. They shoot it down. Oh no. And then they say, well, yeah, even if that wasn't the case, you know how they said it's nothing in Maryland law to say that this is retroactive. So excuse me. So they said, so it doesn't apply to you. I said, okay, right. So I go back. I did this in 1998. In 2011, they had a case came out called Savoy versus State. And in this case, excuse me, in this case, it was the same thing. And they had did the same thing to this guy. They had played all these games. And then it went all the way up to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals got so tired of them playing games, the lower courts, of playing games about these particular issues. The Court of Appeals not only said, yes, it is retroactive, and they explained the whole thing why. It was like a roadmap, right? It was like you just could follow the breadcrumbs, right? And so when I seen that, I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I filed it, and they still, knowing that I was right, they would still shoot it down, hoping that I would give up, and knowing I would have to appeal that decision. Finally, the Court of Special Appeals got tired of lower courts playing games and said, no. Send it back to them and said, y'all go back and relook at that. Because what he's saying is right. Y'all go back and relook at that. 28 days later, I had won my case. I won my first appeal. And then from that point on, I was winning appeal after appeal after appeal until finally I was released. But it was a long and hard journey because to detach yourself in prison is almost impossible because, you got people making noise and they don't care and things like that. So you got to find that little bit of time that is quiet, right? So you can sit down there and try to understand this law, right? And stuff that you've never dealt with before, not in school, not on the streets, no nothing. And look at it, it's almost like it's a foreign language. Well, actually it is because most of the law is written in Latin, where they use a lot of Latin phrases, not written in Latin, excuse me. But it's stuff like that, man, that really, like I always tell the youth, man, is it worth it? Do you really think you got that kind of fucking stamina to fight for something for 20, 25 years? That's a big if.
Hey, let's see, we got a guest with us and stuff. Hey, you gonna introduce yourself, brother?
I'm down with Haze. So we're, you already know, 20 gang.
Ooh. Anything you want to add to that? I know you did some time in prison and stuff yourself and stuff. Anything you want to add to it before we end this video?
Maybe you explain everything, but it's like, do you really want to take that risk and sit down, locked away, gone from your family, outside world, you gotta get it how you live, you gotta take it, like he said about the TED. Oh, y'all got all this. That's how it was when I did my little time. We collected. When somebody got something, or we went in, we took it, or he tagged on, or he got to roll out. People do get rolled out. We politic ourselves. And that's how it is. And like you said, if you really want to do that time, to really want to do that, you gotta think. And you see, big homie for 20 years just for one appeal to get passed. Like you got the heart and stamina to keep fighting and do that, knowing that they messed up. Some people just check out.
Yeah, it's a lot of my homies definitely check out.
And that's all I gotta say.
Hey, y'all heard it first here. Silver Wolf TV. Remember, young people, you don't want to go to prison. They just told you some of the things that can happen when you're in prison. There's no cupcake. That's different from city jail or county jail. We talking about the big house, penitentiary. That's way different. So think about some of the decisions y'all making. You can't take your gun inside with you. Go back to your hands. You can fight with a knife, though. But think about it. Your opponent got a knife too, though. So keep all that in mind and stuff. You know what I mean? So think about that. Right. Silver Wolf TV. God bless.
Probably bigger